Hello, friends. Welcome.
Hello.
Glad you could come out on classic dogwood winter day.
Yeah.
Dogwood's in bloom, and snow's coming down pretty steadily. So you're the hardy few. We are tickled to death that have Avram Friedman back for his third book. We've been honored to host a reading for each of them, and he's just out with the Truth About Pluming. A wide-ranging book with some of his trademark humor, a reminder on the importance of clean water, and maybe even a little something about plumbing, too. A trade you learned in Israel, do I remember? Did you pick up that?
Yes, I did. I learned that when I started learning it when I was in Israel.
Very good. Well, that's enough.
Yeah.
Avram, welcome. Tell us more about your new book.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you all
For being here on this snowy day. We are recording this. If there's anybody here who objects to recording, speak now. Okay. Thank you.
Think about your alibi.
Yeah. I'm going to start off with a song related a little bit to the book about the main source of inspiration, which is water. Water, water, see the water flow. Glancing, dancing, see the water flow. Oh, wizard of changes, teach me the lesson of flowing. Oh, dark or silvery, mother of life. Water, water, holy mystery, heaven's daughter. Oh, wizard of changes, teach me the lesson of flowing. God made a song when the world was new. Water's laughter sings it true. Oh, wizard of changes, teach me the lesson of flowing. So, this good. Oh, thank you. Thank you. So this book is related to water and how we attempt to control water on this planet. What I'd like to do is read several passages from this book and then open it up for discussions and questions, and we'll go from there. The fact that I feel it necessary to begin this narrative with an apologetic explanation should forewarn the reader somewhat about the nature of what is to follow. From the tone of this writing, some readers may conclude that I am the ultimate Luddite, an enemy of technology who promotes a return to the most primitive forms of human survival and habitation. But this is a misreading of my words and intentions. I love to shower, to take long baths. I am grateful that I don't need to trudge outdoors in freezing weather to have a midnight bowel movement or to urinate. I greatly appreciate the increased capability of maintaining a sanitary kitchen, bathroom, and household. Beyond that, please note that I am writing this on a laptop computer and appreciate the advantage and improvement this represents over a typewriter pecked or handwritten process. No, I am not anti-technology. At the same time, I am a truth seeker who insists upon acknowledging all the realities surrounding my existence regardless of whether they bring comfort to my soul or not. So, while modern plumbing unquestionably brings great advantage and comfort to human beings on planet Earth, it's necessary to understand at what cost. This mental exercise can sometimes result in a resemblance to dark humor, of which it is my hope the reader will recognize in relief of what otherwise could bring misery and a sense of hopelessness. Water is life. Whatever human perceived differences exist between scientific and spiritual realities, these two schools of thought converge in agreement on the truth conveyed within this phrase. Water is life, proclaims the Standing Rock Lakota tribe, explaining the existential threat posed by the construction of the Dakota Access Oil Pipeline under the Missouri River, their only drinking water source in the otherwise barren terrain of southeastern North Dakota. In the search for life on other planets, the scientific community focuses on the presence of liquid water because regardless of all else, without this ingredient, life as we know it cannot exist. In order to retain water sustainably, a planet needs a large enough critical mass with gravity strong enough to prevent water vapor molecules from dissipating into space. For liquid water to exist, the world needs to be within a narrow range of distances from the star it is orbiting. Too close and the heat will prevent steam from condensing into liquid. Too far and water solidifies into ice. It is actually a very narrow range of temperatures in which water can exist in liquid form. 0 to 100 degrees centigrade, 32 to 212 degrees Fahrenheit under the pressure of Earth's atmosphere. The uniqueness of planet Earth in this regard is often much underappreciated by its inhabitants. Not only does our planet meet the above specifications of size and orbital distance in relation to the Sun, but because of the tilt of the Earth's rotational axis, we have seasons that bring freezing and thawing cycles, enabling frozen precipitation that results in massive freshwater storage on majestic mountains that later warms and melts into the flow of creeks and rivers for thousands of miles, emptying into enormous oceans that cover 3/4 of the planet's spherical surface area. We have an atmospheric density and composition that provides for the generally stable and consistent hydrological cycle of evaporation and precipitation. We have an unusually large moon that has just the right mass, is just the right distance, and orbits the Earth at just the right speed to allow relatively gentle tides that bring a diversification of aquatic wildlife near our shores as a source of food for human population. The abundance and availability of water is profound and unique in the observable universe, resulting in a world that is teeming with life of all varieties, including human beings. Until human beings came along, for hundreds of millions of years, all forms of life on this miraculous planet did just fine using the availability of water simply as nature provided it. But that wasn't good enough for us. So that is the introduction to the book. And it goes on. Chapter 1 is called The Nature of Plumbing, the Human Condition, more on the human condition, still more on the human condition. These are chapter titles. The Plumber's Condition, People versus Plumbing. And we get to the chapter called Becoming a Plumber, which I'll read from now. Becoming a plumber. Studying political science in college, or creative writing, history, philosophy, or one of the other subjects included under the heading of the arts and humanities. This is the path taken by many who eventually learn to squeeze, climb, bend, and twist their way through life wielding pipe wrenches, propane torch, and PVC glue while wearing leather gloves, dust masks, and safety goggles for as long as can be endured. There are only so many academic positions available on the market, and in varying degrees depending on the current state of the economy, those who are not in the upper echelons of either talent or family connections will find themselves at the end of their college careers with a piece of paper in their hands, testifying to their years of study, but little else to help in the struggle for survival in this world. Rarely, if ever, does a person aspire to become a plumber. It's not as the result of an ambition that these unfortunates have arrived at this livelihood. It's only through a process of life trials, errors, attempt after failed attempt to do something more creative, more contributive to the intellectual evolution of humanity, more fulfilling to the mind, body, and soul, that these poor defeated creatures finally succumb, frustrated in all high-minded endeavors, to be condemned to a life of fixing leaky pipes and unclogging drains. This is not to say that being a plumber is a dishonorable profession. There is no question that it fills a desperate need. There is skill, knowledge, patience, wisdom, and sometimes heroics involved. And yes, honor plus $2.50 may buy a good cup of coffee at the neighborhood bakery. But if you're a plumber, you will at least have the money for such simple pleasures in between each new miserable challenge. You and your tools will live to see another day as the rent or mortgage gets paid, the perpetual truck maintenance is performed, the children are fed, clothed, and with school supplies, and the marriage remains intact, assuming you have an understanding, down-to-earth spouse. This is certain because everyone alive needs water and always will. When the water stops running or the drain stops draining, people will do anything necessary to pay the plumber to fix it. They will borrow money at obscenely high credit card interest rates, steal from neighbors, hit a gas station, or sell themselves into prostitution. Yet it can be argued, even in this latter case, that it is the plumber who is making the greater bodily sacrifice, and that being hired or enslaved as the water bearer is actually the oldest profession in the world. There is no compromising with the need for water. It is life or death. A plumber's livelihood is recession-proof, and the plumber will always be financially secure, as long as litigation is avoided. And that chapter goes on. I'm not going to read it all. This last chapter, or part of the chapter that I'm going to read, is called The Hard Realities of the Physical Universe. Pardon my language. Shit doesn't flow uphill, and hot water is on the left.
Remember.
English teachers, poets, novelists, attorneys, politicians, newspaper and television reporters and commentators can engage in metaphor, fantasy, hyperbole, or subjective interpretation of the truth. But a plumber can indulge none of this. Yes, it is an unyielding truth that human waste and the water that carries it will not flow uphill, and it is a strict cultural standard that hot water must always be on the left. But there is much more depth to this commonly oversimplified reality. If even one fitting is not threaded properly, tightened to the right specifications, neither too much nor too little, and perfectly sealed with joint compound or Teflon tape, it will leak with potentially severe consequences to the home, the homeowner, and to the financial security of the plumber, him or herself. If a pipe is not cut to the precise length needed, it will not fit or will be forced to accommodate stress for which it was not designed, resulting in near-future leakage and/or breakage and systemic failure. If the configuration of waste and vent pipes is not installed correctly, water will not drain properly, traps will fail, sewage gas or raw methane will enter the house, the inhabitants will suffer dire health consequences, and the house can explode if a match is lit or an electrical spark ignites in the wrong time and place. Any plumber worth his or her salt, upon beginning a task, finds it necessary to assume an altered state of consciousness that enables deep concentration to avoid the pitfalls of an endless obstacle course of rock-hard physical limitations and realities. There is no guessing aloud. No fantasizing, no wishing that things work differently than they actually do. It is either hot or cold, left or right, up or down. It either leaks or it doesn't leak. It is either dry or it is wet. It either drains or it doesn't. It either works or it doesn't work. There is no compromise with the reality of the situation. This is the state of mind that is drilled and cemented into the core being of a plumber. If you wish to seek an opinion that is void of delusional thinking, the right person to ask is a good plumber. This does not preclude, however, a capacity for innovation and the use of imagination. Although the plumber's mind is trapped within the limitations of strict physical realities, he or she is often required to create solutions to paradoxical and seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Take, for instance, the case of needing to make a sweat or solder joint repair to a frozen burst copper pipe at the lowest point in the water supply system under a house. A solder joint cannot be sealed when there is any moisture present in the pipe. This is because the tin antimony alloy used to solder copper pipes has a melting point of 460 degrees Fahrenheit. But water in liquid form, when heated under normal atmospheric pressure, will not get hotter than 212 degrees, regardless of how long you hold the torch to it, thereby preventing the metals from achieving their necessary melting and bonding points. So, the pipe and repair fittings must be kept absolutely bone dry during the soldering process. The problem is, since this is the lowest place in the entire plumbing system of the building, all the water in the house is slowly draining directly to this point. Okay? It could take hours, days, or weeks for every drop of water to finally drain and for these pipes to be dry and reparable. You can't stuff a rag or some other absorbent material inside the pipe to temporarily stop the dripping, because once you seal the pipe, the rag's still in there, and the water won't flow past the blockage. The modern miracle of Wonder Bread. White bread may exacerbate diabetes and play havoc with the health of those who are gluten intolerant. But it can't be totally coincidental that this highly processed refined carbohydrate came into global prominence during roughly the same period of human history and evolution as the modern copper plumbing system, because plumbers could not survive without white bread. By manually compressing and stuffing a wad of white bread a few inches into a stagnant copper pipe with the water pressure turned off, the few minutes of absolute dryness necessary to solder a pipe will be provided. Then, when the water pressure is turned back on, the bread dissolves and the problem is solved. It may be necessary to go around the house removing all the screens on the tips of faucets, spouts, and flushing them out. But basically, white bread works with no permanent damage to the system. It also works when PVC and CPVC pipes have to be kept dry for gluing. In extreme circumstances, when the white bread is not available, a light wheat bread can be used. But heavier whole grains are problematic due to high fiber content, subsequently clogging sensitive valve screens and filters in the plumbing system. Neither are these heavy, hardier varieties blessed with the same water-absorbing properties as Wonder White. If White Wonder-style bread ever ceases to exist because the population becomes so health-conscious there is no longer a viable market for its production, we will simultaneously lose the ability to repair broken frozen copper and glue-tight plastic water pipes. Such is the deep ecology of the modern world and the interactive nature of its seemingly unrelated parts. In that vein, there are unforeseen consequences that can arise from the storage and use of white bread for plumbing, such as the time during a drought-stricken lean year when a desperately hungry bear came down out of the hills into my yard at night and rocked my van back and forth trying to break in and steal a loaf I had left on the passenger seat. Now, as far as we know, bears know nothing about plumbing, and this one was, I am certain, just looking for a meal. But the universal consciousness sometimes works in strange and indirect ways. Irrefutably, the bear, knowingly or not, delivered yet another reminder of the trouble we run into when vainly trying to manipulate the natural order of things. So, do I have any questions or comments or?
I would like to say that some of us, over the last few years in the reading group, writing group, were able to see you recreate this.
Mm-hmm.
And it was some of the most enjoyable times that we've spent. You've done a tremendous job with that all.
Well, thank you, Tom, for that great compliment coming from you.
Well, thank you. But it's great and humorous and sadly very truthful.
Indeed. Yeah.
What motivated you to get interested in plumbing to write about it?
Well, the story of how I got involved in plumbing is in this book. I was living in Israel on a kibbutz. This was in 1971 and 72. And we were rebuilding a kibbutz that had been overrun in the 1948 War of Independence, or Jordanian army. This kibbutz was located right on the Israeli side of the West Bank. Okay, and at the time Jordan was occupying the West. For those, this is a very interesting historical fact. Most people don't realize that the state of Jordan was created on the same day as the state of Israel. And the country was divided, and Jordan was occupying the Palestinian, what we now call the Palestinian territory in the West Bank, before Israel was. And Israel had this kibbutz Gezer, 1,000 acres of land on the Israeli side of that border. And it was overrun by the Jordanian army in the 48 war, and Jordan then continued to occupy the West Bank. So we came, this kibbutz was given to a group of American and European young Jewish people to rehabilitate. This was like 20 years later, or well, wasn't, whatever it was, from 1948 until 1970. It was it was uninhabited. And so when we came, we had to rebuild everything, and I was in the winter time, after all the crops were taken care of and everything, we all needed to find a different job, and I found a job on the plumbing crew. And we literally rebuilt each house and all the plumbing, and they all had solar water heaters on, and I learned about solar energy at that time as well. And none of us knew anything about plumbing. And we were all just learning from doing, and we had to find scrap parts, you know, anyway, so I had a very basic training in the mechanics and how plumbing works. That was my first lesson in how I became involved in plumbing. And
so you didn't have the benefit of a like experienced plumber?
no, none of us. We were all young people, ages 18 to like 24, you know, and none of us had a lick of experience about plumbing. Some of us hadn't even ever lifted a pipe wrench before, you know, and we didn't have any books about it. We just kind of looked to see how it was put together and tried to figure it out from that, and we did eventually.
You were motivated.
We were very motivated. Yeah, we needed drinking water. We needed a good sewage system. You know, yeah. I mean, when you need water, you do what you got to do to get it, and that's what we did.
Avram, then did you keep that trade? Did you?
No, it was not my intention to become when I moved to Israel, I had intended to live there the rest of my life, and I became disillusioned with a lot of things that were going on in Israel at the time, and decided to leave and come back here. And for about 10 years, I was kind of a back-to-the-land hippie, you know, and traveled around the country, lived in different communal situations, and didn't actually get my plumbing license. I used the plumbing along the way that I had learned in Israel, but I didn't actually get my plumbing license until I moved here to Sylva, and the reason I moved here with my family is because Southwestern Technical College, which is now Southwestern Community College, had one of two programs in the entire country in which you could get an accredited degree in solar energy technology. And I was really drawn to that. And so we moved here. I got my degree in solar energy technology, and just then President Reagan ended the tax credits for solar energy. And the bottom just fell out of that market, and I found myself tooled up for plumbing, because basically I was training myself to install solar hot water systems. And I went into the plumbing business. I got my license, and with the hope of rejuvenating the solar energy business, and to some degree I did that. But that's the story of how I got into the profession. Again, it's not. I never intended to become a plumber. It wasn't not what I aspired to be. Yeah.
How'd you get into the writing profession?
Well, I think I come by that genetically. My mother was a writer, and there are other writers in my, not too distant family. And I always enjoyed writing, and people told me, "Hey, you're a pretty good writer. Why don't you write down your experiences?" And so that's kind of.
How long ago? When did you switch from plumbing to writing?
Well, even though this is the third book I've published, this is actually the first book I started writing. And I started this, 15 or 20 years ago, and just I kept on getting diverted into other things in my life. And then I broke my leg in 2012 and found that a good excuse to sit down and write. And I wrote The Silver Maple Conspiracy, which is also on sale. and then last summer, while I was in the process of finishing this book, I heard a news report about an asteroid that was going to come very close to the Earth, and there was a small possibility it would strike the Earth on November 2nd of 2020. And I heard that, and the idea just came into my mind, well, what if it actually did hit, and so from that I started writing things down, and I couldn't stop writing about that, and so that book I completed, The Asteroid Hits White House, before I finished The Truth About Pluming, and so that's the story of how the second book got written, and then I finally did find time to finish The Truth About Pluming. And it was published, I think, in January of this year.
How much is it?
How much does it cost? What's it? $15, I think, is The Truth About Plumbing, and Asteroid Hits White House is $18.
Get from a plumber.
Yeah.
You can use that line going forward.
Cheapest thing you'll ever get from a plumber. Yeah, that's probably right.
Barter for the book?
Is what?
Would you barter for the
Yes, I would. With you, I will, Tom.
Avram, your reading ability is also so outstanding, and so I hope that as you share this book and market it or let people know about it, that somehow you'll use your video clips too.
I'm thinking about doing an audio version of the book, actually.
Great.
That's if and when I have time to do that, yeah. Or perhaps a video version. Yeah, Lucy.
Are you already working on another book?
I am, actually, and that's of a more serious nature. It's initially, and this title might change, but it's called Three Winds. And it's about my political involvement, which is another big part of my life, which I kind of touch on in all of my books. But this book, Three Winds, is about three grassroots movements that I've been involved with in my life that were successful against overwhelming odds. And it's not just something I've been involved with, of course. I mean, many other people were involved with the anti-nuclear movement in Oregon, where we actually defeated and closed an existing power plant. We had the first anti-nuclear referendum in the country. And so I talk about the organizational task behind that, all the people that were involved and how we got that accomplished. And then when I moved to North Carolina, the anti-nuclear movement in North Carolina, some of you may and may not know that about 30 miles from here, the Department of Energy was talking about putting in an East Coast high-level nuclear waste repository, right where Haywood, Buncombe, and Madison County come together. And so I organized to have a referendum on that issue in this state, even though at the time I was told that you can't have a referendum. There's no process for citizens developing a referendum. Like in Oregon, we were able to collect a certain number of signatures and get it on the ballot. You can't do that here. So what we had to do is convince the state legislature to do that. And we did. I started a petition. I often tell the story, I pretended we did have the process here. And we went through the process even though it doesn't exist, and we got the state legislature to agree to hold a referendum. And so that's the second story. And then the third story is the passage of the Clean Smokestacks Act, again, against great odds, working against Duke Energy and Progress Energy and other interests that did not want to upgrade the antiquated coal-burning power plants that were causing terrible, Tennessee Valley Authority, Southern Company, and Duke and Progress Energy in North Carolina. They had these antiquated power plants that were grandfathered in and didn't have to meet the strict emission control requirements of the Clean Air Act of 1970. And they kept on delaying their closure so that they could maintain that grandfather status. And as a result, we had terrible air quality, especially here in western North Carolina. And they had air quality monitoring stations in the Great Smoky Mountains that revealed how bad the air quality was. And so we started an organization called the Canary Coalition, and We worked with the Sierra Club and Environmental Defense and other organizations around the state, and we won. And we forced them to install emission control systems or close down those old plants. So that's the book I'm working on now.
You didn't tell about the year you ran for governor.
Well, that was actually part of the nuclear waste, the nuclear waste fight. I had no intention of becoming governor. You know, it was kind of like they asked me at one time. The Charlotte Observer editorial board asked me to come and speak to them, which I did, and they said, "Well, what are you going to do if you become governor? You don't have any experience, you know." And I said, "You know, the worst thing that could happen would be that I'll make a fool of myself, and the second worst thing would be if I actually get elected to that position." You know, I had no intention. All we were trying to do is raise the issue about the waste disposal facility that they were trying to locate, and which was actually different from that first issue, that the high-level nuclear waste. They also tried to locate a low-level radioactive waste facility in North Carolina. This was several years later, 1988, and it was just completely under the radar. They were telling citizens that this was only like hospital gloves and gowns, and that was a lie. It was actually 93% of the waste they were talking about was coming from the nuclear power industry, and it involved all radioactive waste other than anything that strictly comes under the heading of high-level radioactive. It's a very deceptive practice, and so I ran for governor in order to broadcast the truth about this issue, and I'm not going to claim you know, all the credit for that. There are a lot of people involved in that battle, but we did succeed in raising that issue to a very high level, and it caused the state to withdraw from the Southeast low-level radioactive waste compact that would have made North Carolina the largest recipient of low-level radioactive waste in the world.
Well, thank you for fighting that. And I'd have voted for you.
Well, 2% voted for me. Yeah.
Do you self-publish your books?
All three of these are self-published on Amazon. Yeah.
Is
And
it an easy process, or?
it is an easy process. Yeah, I would say it's a very inexpensive process. You can do it for free. Unfortunately, I mean I really don't like doing it that way, you know, because it competes with small bookstores like City Lights and others, you know, that I really want to support. But it was the only way I could afford to do it. I couldn't, you know, I'm an unknown author, and you really can't get someone to pay you to publish. At least, you know, I was not able to, and so I did it myself.
What other things do you do to promote, and what is your favorite?
I'm sorry?
What other things do you do to promote your books, and
Oh.
what's your favorite?
Well, very little. I want to do more readings like this, and I guess, you know, just get the word out, and hopefully someday the right person will see it and broadcast if it's good enough. I don't know, you know. I'm not, you know, holding my breath, as it says. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about Avram. When did we meet? Was it 10 years ago, or
When what?
did we meet?
Peter?
And everything?
When did you and I meet?
Yeah.
I
In
don't.
Sylva,
Yeah.
years ago.
I don't know how long ago that was, Peter. You're Peter, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I guess through Jody,
Well,
my
anyway,
ex-wife.
We both have similarities as far as, you know, I became a plumber unintentionally.
Yeah.
I've been involved doing plumbing since I was like 10, working with my uncle who did a lot of stuff around the house. And so I have a long history, and it just happened that I became to a place that I could actually get a license and
Right.
go through the whole process. And
Congratulations.
and
Yeah.
but it was not kind of liked doing it, and not too many people could do it. And I always had a job, so that was pretty good, and always self-employed. So there are some benefits.
Oh, it's absolutely necessary. I mean, we need plumbers.
Well, you got to.
Yeah.
Got to have it. And one of the customers was a Danish architect, Thomas Atmer. And he was very rich, and his wife was in the federal government somewhere. She was younger. And that probably did, I don't know, $30,000 worth of stuff for them. Old house, mansion in New Hampshire. And one day he says, you know, Peter, the medical profession has really made wonders and improved the life, health in our world, but it really was the plumbers who made it possible to happen. Which is really true, which really echoes what you're saying.
It kind of defines civilization, doesn't it? I mean, plumbing, the
But
ability.
we didn't have people living so closely.
Yeah.
I can see them designing a medal for you, you know. Poop trying to run uphill or something.
And as a matter of fact, in North Carolina, the plumbing board is very concerned because the average age of a licensed plumber is like 67.
Mm.
And so they're trying to encourage younger people
Right.
to consider this is a viable occupation. So there's definitely going to be a shortage. And the other interesting, there was a study, and it discovered that plumbers have a high, disproportionate aptitude with creative input.
Mm.
And they scored, as far as artistic and creative input, the same as committed artists and musicians.
And probably an equal number of alcoholics and drug addicts. Yeah.
That means we got to pay more.
Yeah.
You were talking about how every situation is different.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've been doing it, well, I don't know, 60 years. And I came here because I'd never read a book about plumbing.
Ah. Well, that's why I wrote it, because nobody had done that
Well,
before.
when I saw that, I
Yeah.
said, hey, did you get my email?
I don't know if I did. When did you send that?
2, 3 weeks ago. As soon as I saw it, it was in Facebook.
Oh, in Facebook. I don't always look at Facebook. Yeah.
Me neither.
Okay.
But I did that time.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Well, thank you for being here.
So can we get an autographed one here?
You can, yeah. The books that are for sale are autographed, and those, or I can do it right here if they're not autographed. Yeah, I really appreciate you being here. There's wine and chocolate chip cookies, freshly made, in the back for those who would like to indulge. Is there anything else that I can?
I guess I would have to add that one of the most enjoyable aspects of being a plumber is, number one, showing people respect and care for their home. And the other is spending time in people's homes where they can really be themselves and making friends with their kids and the dogs and the cats and seeing what really happens.
Well, and another chapter of this book, it talks about how plumbers learn all kinds of things about people, you know, by what they find in toilets and things that people probably don't want other people to know about. But you learn the most personal things about people.
This has been delightful. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, City Lights, for hosting me. Thank you.